Alrighty, we are now on to the last video that I am doing today. I have been doing these non-stop to guarantee I get these up here in time. Yay. Yay, yay, yay. So, anyway, we are now up to circulation. So we're going to be talking a lot about the heart and some more stuff about blood. And yes, I like saying it like blood. It would be so much fun if I had actually planned this for next week for Halloween and stuff, but whatever. So, heart. Our heart is a muscular pump that drives the circulation of blood through the body. I'm assuming you already knew this, and when we were talking about the different types of muscles on Monday, we talked about the cardiac muscle, and I kept talking about the heart being a muscle, so there you go. Blood flows through a closed circuit of vessels and every tissue in the body, delivering oxygen from the lungs and nutrients from the digestive tract and picking up wastes for disposal. Already covered this in the last two PowerPoints. So there's going to be a lot of recap here, and so it's going to make it go hopefully a little faster. But these two parts are the two parts that I will probably spend the most time on, is the way it flows through the heart and what makes up our blood. Circulatory systems. Previous PowerPoint, I talked about open versus closed circulatory systems. Open circulatory system. Heart pumps fluid through the open-ended vessels that bathe tissues, cells directly. So open, there's no veins and arteries. It's just all out there. Closed circulatory system is what we have, where the heart pumps the blood and it travels through arteries and capillaries and veins. So I'm going to tell you this constantly, and when we do the circulation lab, it's going to be covered in that as well, where it's arteries away. I say that over again. Arteries away, arteries away. Whenever you see something artery, it means away from the heart. Vein goes towards the heart, artery away from the heart. So the proper way for this to work, and it's going to go into this ad nauseum, and then I'm going to, I already talked about this because I'm doing it right now, is when the heart pumps it out, it goes through the arteries, and then the arteries go all the way out to these little capillaries, and it's like, and then it comes back in, and then when it comes back in, it's going into the veins, because the veins are coming back to the heart. So arteries are going to be oxygen rich, and veins are going to be oxygen poor. That's the way it tends to go. So cardiovascular system of a fish includes a heart with two main chambers. So the fish has two chambers. We have the atrium and the ventricle. Yeah, that's good. Told you this one's going to be shorter. What are the key differences between an open circulatory system and a closed circulatory system? We pretty much covered this with the gas exchange a moment ago. Open means literally that, open. Closed means it has specific vessels, and so it's actually a closed system. It's not just wide open. Yeah. A fish's two-chambered heart pumps in a single circulation. Land vertebrates have a double circulation with a pulmonary and a systemic circuit. This is where we get our blood pressure. You know, the top number and the bottom number, that's where it comes into play. Amphibians and many reptiles have a three-chambered heart. We get a little more and a little more and a little more advanced as you go up the chain. Birds are when you finally get the four-chambered hearts, and then mammals like us, we have four-chambered hearts. God, I hate these stupid little cycle things. Anyway, this is just trying to remind you that the fish gets it in and it goes through and transfers. There you go. Then we have here our double circulation. So you see two different spots for the frog. And then we have our mammal where it has four chambers. I really hate these stupid pictures. We are going to have an actual heart on here so we can then talk it out that way. What's the difference between the single circulation of a fish and the double circulation of a land vertebrate? Well, in the fish, the blood travels from gill capillaries to body capillaries before returning to the heart. In the land vertebrate, it goes from the lungs and returns to the heart a second time before the next circuit. So now we get to our humans. This is the main part that we cover. Ready for some terms? So blood flows through the double circulatory system of humans. Drains from the superior and the inferior vena cava. And again, we're going to have a picture, but superior comes from the top, inferior from the bottom. So the vena cava goes like this. into the right atrium of the heart. Then it pumps, moves out to the lungs via the pulmonary artery, which we haven't gotten to that yet, but it goes from the right atrium to the right ventricle, and then it comes out the pulmonary artery, comes back in pulmonary vein, and then it goes the left ventricle to the left atrium and out the aorta. Yeah, you're going to need to know all that. I'm sorry, totally distracted going, they told him to pose like that. That's just so funny to me. So, pulmonary circuit, the yellow, that's your heart and lungs. The systemic circuit, heart and the rest of the body. Wow, this picture. Okay, I get what it's trying to show you. Let's get this little laser pointer. Okay, so we have our superior vena cava and our inferior vena cava. Both of them land right here into the right atrium. Then it goes through these valves, poof, into the right ventricle. Then your heart pumps and it shoots out here. Notice it goes both lungs. It's not only one lung, but in most pictures it only shows one side. But it's going out here, and so this is the pulmonary artery because, well, pulmonary, and then artery, remember I said artery away, that's taking it away from the heart, goes into the lungs. So now the dirty blood, the oxygen poor blood, goes into the lungs, and you're breathing and it's doing its thing and it's dropping off the carbon dioxide and it's picking up the oxygen, and then it goes into the vein because the veins go towards the heart. So now this goes towards the heart and it lands in the left atrium. Now it is oxygen rich, and so, or you can say oxygenated, and then with the next little pump it goes through these valves. And notice how thick this muscle is. This is some of the thickest muscle, and it's because when it goes poof, it has to have the strength to go shoo, out the aorta. And so it pumps up here and goes out into the aorta, and the aorta is what then starts spreading it out through the rest of your body. So why does blood in the pulmonary veins have more oxygen than the blood in the vena cava, which are also veins? There we go. Pulmonary veins carry blood from the lungs where it picks up the oxygen to the heart. The vena cava is carrying blood returning to the heart after delivering the oxygen to body tissues. So again, arteries away, veins towards. The veins are always going towards the heart. For the most part, that is bringing all the junk back to get rid of. But when it's going from the lungs to the heart, it's still going towards the heart, so it's still a vein. But since it's coming directly from the lungs, it's full of oxygen because that's what it's there for. Now, during diastole of the cardiac cycle, the blood flows from the veins into the heart chambers. During systole, the contractions of the atria push the blood into the ventricles, and the stronger contractions of the ventricles propel blood into the large arteries. So your diastolic and your systolic pressure, that's what these are. Heart valves prevent the backflow of blood. So they're basically like this, because when you push this way, it's easy open. But then going this way, it's like, it's supposed to lock. And it does that to keep backflow away, because if you're bringing old blood in and you're trying to push it out here and then have nice healthy new blood, you don't want it going backwards. Has to be forward. This is one of the things the doctor is listening for when they're listening to your heart. It's actually called lub-dub. I think that's interesting, and I think we get to it here. And when there is a heart murmur, it means that one of those valves is a little bit leaky, because that's what they're hearing. The volume of blood that each ventricle pumps per minute is the cardiac output. Heart rate is the number of heartbeats per minute. I think we already knew that. Look, isn't this picture so much better than that other one they had? So This is a little similar to the one I give you to practice with. And when you do the one we practice with, I will expect you to say superior vena cava, inferior vena cava. This is where you know that the dirty blood or the deoxygenated blood comes in here. Then it pumps through these valves and then it pumps out into the lungs. Yes, both directions, but I always just go this way because it's easier. And then in the lungs, it's dropping off the carbon dioxide and it's picking up oxygen. And then it comes into the heart and then here, and then it pumps hard and out the aorta to the rest of the body. So there you go. This is trying to help you understand systole versus diastole. It's when very particular valves open and close. So we have our SA node and our AV node. SA generates electrical impulses in the atria, sets the rate of heart contractions. Cat just walked behind me. AV node relays these signals to the ventricles and triggers ventricular contractions. So if you get an EKG, or apparently an ECG, I've never heard it called ECG, I've only heard EKG. This detects the electrical impulses in your heart and can provide data about heart health because it's letting them know how it works. Now, fun fact, if you are somebody similar to like, me, and you tend to be like this at all times, because we know I hold a lot of tension, a lot of anxiety. My shoulders live way higher than they should. If you've noticed, they're kind of like forward because I have a hard time keeping them back like that. It's not just a posture thing. It's a all my muscles are pulled too tight thing. When they test me, I've had it before where they hooked me up to do the EKG, and the nurse got all kinds of concerned because she thought that there was something seriously wrong with my heart, and she had me laying there and had me tense all my muscles, and then I held them tight for a moment, and then I relaxed them all. And as soon as I relaxed them all, then all of a sudden, nice and normal. Should have had a perfectly healthy heart. Absolutely really good. It's just I put a lot of strain because I'm always like this. And sadly, it's like almost no medications work. And somebody asked me in class about CBD, and I told you why I haven't done that. And but what I forgot to tell you in class is how many medications I have tried, and it does nothing, like nothing. But I'm going to talk more about that in class. So if you watch this, remind me, and I'll fill you in, because everybody's personal chemistry is different, and mine is weird, like really weird. Okay, so pacemaker. This is setting the pace for your heart. This is the electrical impulse. This is why if somebody has an artificial pacemaker, that's why it's called that, is it is mimicking what this part of the heart is supposed to do. Yeah, this is just showing you the contractions. So contract, small there, little contract, whoa, big contract. That's when it's poof, pumping it the rest of the way out of your heart. This is the artificial pacemaker. So it's in there in order to make it all work properly. We talked about this briefly on Monday. I remember that. Don't remember why we talked about it, but we did. Okay, checkpoint question. Slight decrease in blood pH causes the SA node to increase the heart rate. We just talked about this when we were talking about the gas exchange. How would this control mechanism benefit a person during strenuous exercise? Seriously, it's the same question. It's because we need more oxygen, and so it's just speeding us up to breathe more. There you go. Already covered this in the last chapter. Now, heart attack. Oh, I hate talking about these. It's very important, and you need to know about it. This is part of why I am the way I am, for like not consuming certain things, trying to be careful, trying really hard to get healthier, because heart attack is what killed my father. I was 14 years old and he was 42. That's not very old. 42 is not old. It might be to people who are really, really young, but the fact that I'm now 49, I have outlived my father by 7 years. That's kind of freaky. He died of a heart attack, because what happens here is you have two different things. One, the heart can just sit there and keep deteriorating. It's just death of the cardiac muscle. But normally we have something where it's like a block, like a clot. So when we talk about the LDL and HDL cholesterol previously, I've talked about saturated fats, trans fats, and I've talked about how the saturated fats clog up sections of your veins and arteries. Smoking has the nicotine. Nicotine is like putting little bits of glue throughout your veins and arteries. All of these types of things, it's building up your blood pressure, because how I explain this one to my mom is, if you've ever used a garden hose, you have the garden hose, you turn on the water and you're holding it, and it's just like psh, psh. And then you're like, well, I kind of want to reach a little bit farther. You're not turning up how much water you're spraying, but you cover half the end of the hose. So you cover part of the area and it comes out so much harder, so much faster. Same amount of water, but since you closed up how much space it had, it's harder. That's what happens with your blood pressure. So your body is still pumping the same amount of blood, but by narrowing the amount of space it has, it goes harder. And my cat is walking across everything. Yes, I know. Come here. That's causing a rise in blood pressure. Now, you mix clogging up your veins and arteries, some like that. So you're increasing the blood pressure, and then if it knocks a clot loose and it goes through the circulatory system, it can hit the heart, which can then kind of cause it to go thump. There you go. So more than half of all deaths in the US are caused by cardiovascular disease. This is something that is mostly preventable if you just made healthier choices. And so half of every death in the US being based on something that you could totally just not do, that's kind of huge. Stroke is very similar, but instead of it hitting the heart, it's hitting the brain. And my mom has had a couple of strokes. And then I told you about my friend Jim, who's had multiple strokes. And the stroke is death of brain tissue due to the lack of oxygen, again, resulting from a rupture or blockage of arteries in the head. So this whole circulation thing, insanely important. Arteries of most victims of a stroke or heart attack become impaired gradually by chronic cardiovascular disease known as atherosclerosis. There you go. What's happening here, it's pretty much what I was just describing, where you have all these little fatty deposits, they're called plaque, slowly building up on the inner walls. And it's making it narrower and narrower, so you had a vein or an artery like this, and then it's like this, and then it's like this, and then it's like this. So it's the equivalent of you covering more and more and more of the end of that hose. So that's going to cause your blood pressure to get higher and higher because there's just less and less space. So there you go. They're constantly trying different ways to help people with this. Now this is showing you the blockage of a coronary artery resulting in a heart attack. So right here it's showing that there's a blockage right there, so everything below it is dead because it can't switch out the oxygen and carbon dioxide. So it starts killing part of your heart. Heart health is not a joke, man. Normal artery versus one that's partially blocked. So the poor blood's trying to flow through there, but there's a clot. There's plaque. It's like a traffic jam. And it's like this until suddenly it just knocks it loose. And if you're lucky, it helps break it apart. More often than not, it's going to cause something happen to your heart or to your brain. So some people will they'll have too many issues, so they will have an operation. They will put in something called a stent. And this is basically making like a little fence in order to hold it open. So it's not quite holding the plaque in place, but it's expanding the vein or artery so then the blood can actually flow through. My mom has actually had, I want to say there were arteries replaced in both legs due to all of this. Her carotid artery quite a few years ago had 98% blockage. Let that sink in. And she had that operated on. And then a couple of years ago, she had more blockage and she had to have another operation. And so she doesn't have a horribly unhealthy diet, but she did eat a lot of butter. She loved butter. She's one of those convinced that she has a very healthy diet, but it's like all over the charts because she reads something and decides this is the perfect diet and then sticks with that and keeps not having a wide enough variety. And she is reaping what she sowed basically throughout the past 7 decades of her life. So what you do now really does affect you when you get older. So structure and function of blood vessels. Again, arteries away. I can't say it enough. That will help you remember it forever. Arteries have elastic fibers that recoil after stretching and contain a thick layer of smooth muscle in their walls that can constrict and reduce blood flow. That's because arteries are under high pressure, so they have to be able to take that extra. Veins have thinner walls and lower blood pressure and velocity. One-way valves permit blood to flow only towards the heart. Again, it's because it's taken the dirty stuff back. It doesn't want to mix it all up. And then capillaries have thin walls and exchange gas and fluid with interstitial fluid. Oh, crazy words. Anyway, capillaries, thin walls, it's because those are the little ones that just branch off to the end, and that's where that whole diffusion thing takes place that we have talked about a couple of times now. So this is just trying to show you and is asking you the question, how does the structure of a capillary relate to its function? Boom. Smaller diameter and thin walls of the capillaries facilitate the exchange of substances between blood and the fluids. And so again, diffusion. It's so thin, it just lets it. Blood pressure. Blood pressure depends on the cardiac output and the resistance of the vessels. So the pressure is highest in the arteries. Blood velocity is slowest in the capillaries. Your skeletal muscle contractions and one-way valves keep blood moving through the veins to the heart. Checkpoint question. If blood pressure in the veins drops to 0, what does blood velocity increase as blood flows from venules to veins? Or why does blood velocity increase? I went too far. I gave you the answer to that one. There. Dun-dun-dun. Blood pressure is measured as systolic and diastolic. Yeah, I realize I think I just totally skipped right past it when I get to this one. Hypertension is high blood pressure. Hyper for high, if you remember that. Most people can have this controlled. My mom is one of those that's having major issues because hers is very hard to control because her body rejects almost all medicines. There's a few that she can handle, but she develops allergies like crazy. She actually has an entire typed sheet of paper front and back of her various allergies. And as each year goes by, her body decides it can't handle yet another medication. So hers is pretty bad, and she falls under this whole category. She's had a couple of strokes, and she is in stage 3 kidney failure. And it's from prolonged high blood pressure. Checkpoint question. If a woman's blood pressure is consistently 140/75, does this count as hypertension? Yep. Even though 75 is normal, 140 is considered elevated because they think it needs to be closer to 120. Now, this has varied over the years, and this is a very good indicator of like what people are complaining about now. As they come out with more stuff about coronavirus and COVID, and they say this, and then people sit there and pitch a fit and go, well, they said this 2 months ago. Well, which is it? You learn as you go. You sit there and, you figure everything out. Oh my God, this is the worst analogy on the planet. I'm so sorry. Kind of like when you potty train a child. First, you just teach them to let you know. Then you teach them to sit on the potty and go in the potty. Most people teach them on a little plastic potty before they move them to the actual toilet. Then you eventually start teaching them how to wipe. If you used the mentality people have about what is good for them with that kid could sit there and complain, why didn't you just tell me to do all this at first? It's stages, it's steps. But where the blood pressure is they really did believe this one little window was the healthiest spot. But as they have delved more into understanding the heart and blood pressure, because we are continuously studying these things, we are continuously learning things, they have found that 120, I think it's 120 over 70, and 120 over 60 is supposed to be some of the best blood pressure. Because you don't want it too low, but too high does cause more pressure. And so where when I was a kid first learning about all this, 140 was considered good, 140 is now considered elevated because it's putting a little more pressure than there needs to be. So here it's showing you measuring the blood pressure. We have our automatic ones and we have our manual ones. Most places use the automatic ones. I get high blood pressure every time the automatic one is used, every single time. But that stems from when I had my first son. It was a 25-hour labor and they hooked me up to the blood pressure. Yeah. I think it was this arm. They hooked me up to the blood pressure cuff and it was set to automatically run and it was too tight. And I told them it was too tight and they never adjusted it. They just said, oh, it's just, oh no, you just think it's tight. No, it was actually too tight. And so nursing majors, please, when somebody says something's too tight, check it. Because by the time my son was born and they took it off, I had a bruise all the way around my arm, the exact size of the blood pressure cuff. And so to this day, they put it on there. As soon as I hear that brrr, my blood pressure shoots through the roof. If you use the regular manual one, my blood pressure's fine every time. But man, that automated one shoots it through the roof. So pay attention to your patient. Now, 1 in 3 American adults have hypertension. That means a third of the American population have high blood pressure. That's concerning. So, here we go. Pre-hypertension. If you are 120 through 139, or this is your bottom number, top number, bottom number, you are already considered pre-hypertension. You are supposed to be careful. You need to learn to, and they're going to talk to you about your diet, your stress levels, make sure that you've had your cholesterol checked. They're going to tell you to reduce your sodium intake and your red meat and things like that. Normal, the healthiest one, is going to be if your blood pressure is less than 120. So like if it's 115 over 70, that would be really good. I do not know what mine currently is. I know my resting heart rate, but my Fitbit thing doesn't tell me my blood pressure. Which I'm glad, because can you imagine if the Fitbit did that? That'd be weird. Would it like all of a sudden inflate on my arm? Smooth muscles in the walls can influence blood pressure by changing the resistance to blood flow out of the arteries and into the arterioles. Basically, these are like the little capillary things off the arteries. By opening and closing the precapillary sphincters, we already discussed sphincters. They open and close to protect backflow. The blood flow to the capillary beds in particular regions can be increased or decreased. This is so it can control what's going where when it needs it. What two mechanisms restrict the distribution? Well, we just talked about it in there. The constriction, so less blood reaches the capillary bed, or contraction to the sphincter, so the blood flows through those channels only and not the capillary beds. This is so it can control where it goes, when it goes. Capillaries are the only blood vessels with walls thin enough for the substances to cross. Blood pressure forces the fluid and small solutes out of the capillary and the arterial end, and osmotic pressure will draw the fluid at the venous end, so towards the vein, because the blood has a higher concentration of solutes than the interstitial fluid. I can't do these words. But if you remember when we did the osmosis stuff, high concentration to low concentration. This is when I talked about the importance of balanced out, in that if you have too much sodium and not enough water, that's why you swell, is because the osmotic pressure is trying to balance it. And so it's pulling the fluid out of your blood and into the surrounding tissue to try to balance it. So that's what that is. Explain how severe protein deficiency in the diet and decreases the concentration of blood plasma proteins can cause the accumulation of fluid in body tissues. And did I skip right past? Yeah, apparently I skipped right past the question and just gave you the question and answer together. Anyway, same thing I was just talking about, because osmosis, diffusion of the fluids, that's what this is. This is your body trying to balance. It wants that happy medium, 50-50. That's what it's doing. So if you are not consuming enough fluids, it's still going to try to disperse the solutes, so it's going to pull more fluid out. Structure and function of blood. Plasma contains various inorganic ions, proteins, nutrients, wastes, gases, and hormones. We have red blood cells, and when we do this lab, I break these down where erythro, erythro means red. Cyte is, or is it just earth? Anyway, cyte is cell. So this is how you can remember it's the red blood cells. White blood cells, leukocytes, the leuko part means white. And the white blood cells are what helps fight infections. And some of these are the phagocytes, which engulf and digest bacteria. So they're the ones that go and then munch it away. And then we have our platelets, which are also known as thrombocytes. And these are the ones that help with clotting. So I think I use almost this exact picture in the lab. Plasma is 55% of your blood. This is where you have mostly water and those few other things. This is how, if you have ever been sick and they took your blood and they come back and they tell you you're dehydrated, and you're like, how can you tell that from my blood? If you don't have at least 55% plasma, that means you're dehydrated. You need the water. Then we have our red blood cells, which is, well, it says 45%. It's that. The white blood cells are this little part, that's your buffy layer. And that is a very tiny amount. And so when they say you have an elevated white blood cell count, that's how they can tell, is when this little bit's a little higher. Notice this says centrifuged blood sample. How this works is they take your blood, and if you've ever noticed, they're in these little test tubes. They take it to a machine called a centrifuge. They plug it in there and it spins it really fast. So the heavier stuff gets slung to the end. And so the red blood cells are the heaviest. So they're the ones that go all the way down here. Then you have your little buffy coat, and then you have your water. And that's how it all separates. And I think it's kind of cool. But we talk more about that in a blood lab. Breaking it down, what it's for, why you have it, showing you the different types of white blood cells. These are the things that are helping you fight infections and parasitic infections and colds and different things like that. These are the clotting, help like when you cut yourself, the part that goes up there and makes it stop bleeding, or if you like, bam, you hit yourself. A bruise is where you broke a blood vessel underneath the skin, and so what you see as the bruise, that's the blood that escaped. So you need the platelets to clog that up as well inside the body. This is why if somebody is on a blood thinner medication, they're supposed to be very careful, and if they like hit their head or something, they need to go get checked, because you can hit your head and start having bleeding on the brain and you don't even realize it until there's like really bad stuff. Okay, anemia. This is from low amounts of hemoglobin or a low number of red blood cells. This can cause fatigue due to lack of oxygen in the tissues. The hormone EPO will stimulate the bone marrow to produce more red blood cells, because blood is made from your bone marrow. Checkpoint question. Why might increasing the number of red blood cells result in greater endurance and speed? What is our red blood cells doing? Well, oxygen. Because your red blood cells are the part of you that is transporting, they're bringing all the oxygen to everything and then taking the carbon dioxide and stuff away. So your red blood cells are what's moving all the nutrients through your entire body. Then blood contains self-sealing materials that are activated when blood vessels are injured. So this is what I was just talking about with the platelets and clogging up the holes, basically. So plugging the leak. So this is what happens. Something happens, you start to bleed, the platelets go, oh no, and then they plug it up, and then they sew up a nice little area in order to, not bleed out. There you go. Unspecialized adult stem cells differentiate into blood cells in red marrow inside bones. Differentiate means it's basically becoming what it needs to be. So when a cell is undifferentiated, it means it has not been told what to become. Once a cell is differentiated, that means it has now told what cell it will be, and then it starts to become that. So when a stem cell divides, one daughter cell will remain a stem cell and the other one takes the special function. This way, the body can keep up a couple of stem cells. Stem cells are insanely important. Yes, we all have them, but we don't have a whole bunch of them. They've already shown that women who have been pregnant actually still retain more stem cells than a woman who's never been pregnant or a man, because the process of being pregnant and creating life, that's making more stem cells. So when you read about stem cell research, no, stem cell research is not just about working with aborted babies. There are stem cells in people traditionally. Yes, if a pregnancy has been terminated, there are stem cells, but there's also a whole bunch of stem cells in the umbilical cord. And so if you donate the cord blood, if you donate the umbilical cord to science, to research, they can keep producing those stem cells and they can continue on with the stem cell research, which, oh my gosh, there's so much stuff that can be helped with that because, read up on some stem cell research, because I realize I'm going off track again and I'm trying really hard to finish these. Leukemia. Leukemia is cancer of the leukocytes. So if you remember, that's going to be your white. That's going to be in the white blood cells. Blood stem cells produce all types of blood cells and can be transplanted to treat blood cell diseases. So this is why, if you believe in helping people and you're willing to go through a little uncomfortableness, sometimes outright pain, to help somebody else, becoming a bone marrow donor is a good thing. I have been on the list for, 7 years now, and I have yet to be called to try to donate any bone marrow. I know someone who has, and he said it's not comfortable, but you can save somebody's life and it's not giving up something. It's like in class when somebody was saying, but it's my spare, when we were talking kidneys, your body's constantly making this. And so you can honestly donate some bone marrow to help somebody else when their body does not produce it. So it's pretty cool. But anyway, your bone marrow makes all the different types of blood cells. So why would a leukemia patient's bone marrow need to be destroyed and then replaced with a transplant? Well, because it's not working properly. Because the bone marrow would be destroyed to kill the cancerous white blood cells. Because if it's literally all in the white blood cells, kill them, replace it, bam, you can actually do better. So that's why I really want to help. And that is it with this. We will be talking more blood later, and we will talk RH factor and stuff like that. This is the picture of the heart that I will have on the test. And you are going to need to be able to identify the parts like the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava. You're going to have to say that it comes in. Hey, can I actually draw? Let's try this. Okay. Yeah. What I do is I tell people you draw here to show it goes in, and here that it goes in, and then it comes this way through there, And then I normally draw an arrow here to make sure it's understood. Whoa. Well, you know where it's supposed to go. It's not supposed to be out of that artery, that. And then I say lungs. Whoa, this is a lot harder to write with. There we go, lungs. Now I have, can I change the color? Yes, I can. There we go. So now I have picked up my oxygen, and now I come back in here and I go here, and then, whoa, well, there, and then through here, and then out the aorta. And so that shows where it comes in and where it goes out. And so I can also say that it's going in here, and I can say that it is coming out there. And then this would also be lungs. There we go. So, how about that? On your final, you're going to be labeling the parts of the heart. You're going to be labeling superior and inferior vena cava, left and right atrium, left and right ventricle, aorta, mentioning where the lungs are. You're going to have to say what the clean blood is and what the dirty blood is. Dirty blood is what I drew in red. That is the deoxygenated blood. That is one that does not have oxygen. It has the carbon dioxide. The clean blood is the oxygenated blood. I drew it in blue. That's the one that's holding the oxygen. So you're going to be expected to draw this and label it. And that will be on your final, and I will give you a copy of this image, and then that's what you do. I can't believe I got to draw on it. I'm actually kind of excited. I just kind of wish I had a mouse pad, because that probably would have made it smoother than on this old whatever kind of table this is. Anyway, that's it. I got all 3 of these done. Yay. Do not forget to do your homework. You have to have those 3 days worth of things you consumed and all of your activities, so we can do our lab on Monday. And that's pretty much it. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions, but I will be not responding to anything on Friday or Saturday. Just a reminder. So there you go. Peace out.